Okay, so here's my pitch. So we know that Carl Kenneth Franzfi worked for the American banknote, but I think it's important to talk about what the American banknote was doing at the time of his tenure. The practices that were going on during his tenure were so corrupt that they passed the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. This is in tangent with the corruption that was going on with banking in America as well. The FCPA was passed in 1977, and that was in large part thanks to the Church Committee hearings as well. And the American banknote was at the forefront of statecraft during that time. Besides printing currency for over 70 nations, they were also in charge for things like passports and IDs. And if you know anything about IDs, you know that Jeffrey Epstein had a fake passport, actually a few of them, with a different name. Marius Robert Fortelli was the name, that he used for a Saudi Arabian birthplace. It was an Austrian passport, and that was issued by the American banknote because they were in charge of that at that particular time. It was discovered through the Church Committee hearings and other operations that were happening at that time, such as Operation Condor, Operation Minerva, all involved the American banknote giving fake securities to companies that were used as fronts by the CIA. And all of these fronts needed documents, and all of the documents were secured through the American banknote. Some of the colleagues and successors of Carl Kenneth Franzfi also ended up in trouble. Like one in particular was a colleague, and it took 10 years to sentence him because of his intelligence ties. For example, we know that Morris Weissman, he worked with Carl Kenneth Franzfi, and he was the successor after Carl. And he established a unique legal precedent for executives involving black budget operations. Precedent meaning that his case was so unique because it was delayed, the sentencing. He was convicted in 2003 for 115 million securities fraud, and Weissman's sentencing was delayed for nearly a decade. That's because the delay in the eventual leniency was granted because Weissman had performed classified work for U.S. intelligence agencies. So the legal precedent that was brought up is because this case demonstrated that executives at sensitive firms like American Banknote could use National Security Service as mitigating factors in criminal sentencing, effectively shielding them from the full consequences of corporate corruption. This is funny because it sort of mirrors what Alan Dershowitz was saying when he was on Piers Morgan, and he brought up the fact that if Jeffrey Epstein was Mossad, he could have got a more lenient sentence for his crimes if he would have brought that up. Effectively stating that if you're a part of corruption and the intelligence agencies are the ones directing the corruption, you're going to get a lot more leniency in your sentence, which is corrupt as hell. Here's an example of the work they were doing at the time of Carl Kenneth Franzfi's tenure. So, an investigative report that was done by the Washington Post and the German broadcaster ZDF, the CIA and West German intelligence, BDN, secretly owned the Swiss company called Crypto AG for decades, using it to eavesdrop on encrypted communications for over 120 countries. The operation, known as Operation Rubicon or Operation Minerva within the CIA, provided a unique window into the atrocities committed by South American military dictatorships during the 70s and 80s. The supply network. The CIA and BND supplied rigged encryption machines, specifically models like CX-52, to regimes in Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, Brazil, Paraguay, and Bolivia. They had knowledge of the atrocities by decrypting these countries' communications, and the CIA had real-time knowledge of Operation Condor, which was a coordinated campaign of state-sponsored terror involving cross-border kidnappings, torture, and the disappearance of dissidents. So, despite intercepting communications regarding a 1973 military coup in Chile, or the 1976 military coup in Argentina, or the 1976 car bombing assassination of Orlando Letelier and Ronnie Moffett in Washington, D.C., the practices of death fights where dissidents were thrown from airplanes into the ocean, the CIA didn't act on these human rights abuses and violations, and the CIA declassified files showed that the officials didn't try to disclose or stop the atrocities. So basically, Carl's job and his role as the vice president during that time and any other key executives functioned as an operational glue that allowed rig technology to reach the market through gentlemen's agreements and a technical backdoor executives oversaw. Basically, they oversaw that integration of the NSA design algorithms into machines like the HC500 series that ensured the backdoors were physically manufactured into the hardware by partners like Motorola and Siemens. We saw this similarly with the Israelis in the pager thing where they blew up those people. Plausible deniability. By having high-level executives at the point of contact, the CIA would ensure that the rest of the workforce remained unaware that the products they were building were intentionally flawed, black profits. The operations was so profitable that became self-funding, further shielding it from congressional oversight, laundering sales revenue and acquisition capital. According to the Washington Post, the CIA used the massive surpluses from crypto AG sales to purchase other still undisclosed technology companies to expand their signals, intelligence, and reach. So basically, in summary, hypothetically, Franz V's position would have the technical means to facilitate the production of the physical tools like IDs, currency, and bonds that Epstein's network relied upon. While his public legacy was one of high moral fiber and military honors, his role sat at the exact intersection of manufacturing and sovereign security that the Khashoggi-Epstein network utilized to move across borders. This involves the BCCI. I'll explain. So, the trusted vendor pipeline. Lori and Kent Franz V's companies specialized in network security and earned value management, EVM, and global government contracting. At American Banknote, Carl managed the physical production and tools of sovereignty like currency and IDs. But by the time Lori and Kent started their ventures, the security industry had shifted from physical printing to digital encryption and data integrity. Carl's 30-year trusted history as trusted custodian for the U.S. Treasury and foreign central banks would have provided the ultimate character reference for his children to win sensitive contracts for the DoD and other federal agencies. So the BCCI, which is the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, and the American Banknote, they shared a financial networks, and it was known as the Banks of Crooks and Criminals, which the CIA used to funnel money for clandestine operations abroad, including paying agents and supporting guerrilla groups, laundering money through things like Operation Rubicon and Crypto AG. And just like the American Banknote used the Marx Foundation and Liechtenstein, and profits generated by ABN, and managed the sales of the rigged crypto AG machines to foreign governments were black and untraceable. The BCCI served as one of the primary victims for laundering these funds back to the United States intelligence ecosystem to funnel money for clandestine operations abroad, including paying agents and supporting guerrilla groups. Laundering Operation Rubicon profits. The millions in profits generated by American Banknote managed the sale of rigged crypto AG machines to foreign governments were black and untraceable. BCCI served as one of the primary vehicles for laundering these funds back to the United States intelligence ecosystems. The nominee strategy. Just as American Banknote used the Marx Foundation and Liechtenstein as a nominee to hide CIA ownership of Crypto AG, BCCI used prominent Middle Eastern individuals as fronts to secretly and illegally gain control of U.S. banks in First American Bank shares. Intelligence overlap. The BCCI founder Aga Hassan Abadi was reportedly recruited by the CIA in 1984, integrating the bank even more deeply into operations that mirrored the secrecy of the Angleton-era quote-unquote Cuban business. The vice president of manufacturing link. So, Carl Kenneth Franz V, as the vice president of manufacturing at American Banknote, was the executive who ensured the black hardware was built. BCCI was the mechanism that ensured the black payment for the hardware could be recycled into further covert operations. So these firms have institutional shielding, and they have a history of consulting with Department of Defense and DHS, providing a sovereign layer of protection that mirrors the ABN BCCI model. So high-level government vetting and security clearances. The most direct transfer in security industry is the security clearance. Growing up as a child of the Silver Star recipient, Carl Kenneth Franz V, and high-level trusted custodian of the U.S. money supply makes the security adjudication process significantly easier for the next generation. Lori's firms were able to bid on highly sensitive EMP protection and infrastructure contracts. This sort of field requires the same level of federal legacy trust that Carl established back in 1942, because I found on his draft card that he was working for the American banknote that was his employer listed on the draft card. So he goes back a long ways with this type of security clearance and legacy. But I'm mainly talking about the corruption in the 70s because it's more closer to present day. So Lori's LinkedIn and company profiles highlighted the history of network security and service delivery for industries that require deep federal trust. Ken Francevy served as the program research director at AZ Tech International, Inc., focusing on the technical side of security infrastructure his father once built physically. Investigators suggest that Lori Francevy's professional auditing and security credentials provided the operational cover and technical quality assurance for digital and physical channels through which Epstein's foundations moved assets. So Lori was an ISO 9000 auditor, and a lot of the companies that she was in charge of passing through and making sure had certain cargo, etc., and quality assurance, they call it. She was in charge of that, auditing that. So it would make a closed loop for networks like Epstein and Khashoggi, or Epstein in general if he was trafficking women in those Eastern Bloc countries. Like I said, she was an ISO 9000 an auditor, so the overlaps between 1995 and 2000. Her tenure as the corporate lead auditor in the UK, Germany, and the Netherlands provided her with deep institutional access in the early days of Epstein's rise. The Lease portfolio, we're talking about Douglas Lease's children, who was friends with Epstein's, and in the email between 95 and 2000, Francevy reportedly conducted an ISO 9000 audit for firms within the Lease brothers' portfolio. Those are two brothers who worked with Epstein. They are all over the emails. This role allowed her to map the structural vulnerabilities and quality management of the tech defense firms Epstein and the Leases used for high-level contracting. Institutional audit cycles. The ISO certifications typically involve annual surveillance audits, creating a consistent reason for Francevy to travel to the same UK and European hubs where Epstein's network was being. So if we're going to link this, the Francevy family, to the historical American banknote, the BCCI and Epstein infrastructure, you have to look at the transition from the physical manufacturing era of the 70s to the digital and political influence era of the 2010s and today. Lori Francevy and Kent Francevy are the children of Carl Kenneth Francevy. Well, she's the daughter-in-law. He's the kid. And ABN, and he was the vice president of American Banknote Manufacturing and the parents of Erica Kirk. Their roles provide the generational bridge in this hypothesis. Ken Francevy is the financial investigative link. He is his professional background often cited by researchers looking for a continuation of the fixer model. The investigative background. Kent has been associated with private investigation and security consulting. In the Epstein model, private security and intelligence gathering often are used for catch-and-kill operations and compromise, and they were the primary tools used to protect the network back in the day for the ABN and BCCI model. Now they are utilizing that similar model as auditors and through their defense contracts. So back then, during Carl Kenneth Francevy's time as vice president, in manufacturing leadership, Chauncey P. Foote was appointed VP of Manufacturing in 1958, and his role oversaw the physical production of American banknotes' high-security products, including currency and specialized encryption hardware, supplied to those foreign governments as part of Operation Rubicon. Carl Kenneth Francevy served as an executive during American Banknote and identified during the World War II draft records as being employed there. His tenure overlapped with Foote's for over 2 decades, and it also overlapped with Morris Weissman, which I said earlier was that case that set a precedent about being helping intelligence agencies and working for them, doing illegal things. Francevy acted as a clandestine liaison between the private sector and the intelligence community, specifically managing relationships that required BCCI-linked accounts to move black money. Foote provided the technical expertise to ensure the numismatic system of delivery correctly masked the shipment of rigged equipment, making it indistinguishable from routine banknote and security print shipments. Institutional continuity. Both men were central to the transition from mechanical to electro security systems that ensure American banknote remained the CIA's preferred corporate front for decades. Here's a little chart to help show the modern functional placement of these fronts now and collaborators with intelligence agencies, which mirrors what was going on with the American banknote, Carl Kenneth Franz v. and the BCCI and the CIA back in the day. We have the shell group, the company, the associates, and how that sort of mirrors what was going on back then. So here's a clear alignment of the functional alignment and summary of what I'm trying to show you. That Carl Kenneth Franz v., his focus was on physical security. He had the technical capacity for sovereign IDs, as well as bearer bonds and other securities. The AZ Tech and other companies like E3 Tech, Kent and Intelemet, Kent and Lorry, that's network security consulting for government defense sectors, digital fixer tools, also ISO auditors. Then we have the real estate, the liquidation of Epstein's tainted assets, things like that. He used real estate to move money. Erica obviously worked for the Corcoran Group. And then we have her as TPUSA. She's the current CEO and chair and the primary front for youth mobilization, political and data collection. So that's a little bit of a summary of the functional alignment that we see today. Some of the tactics that Carl used during his tenure would have been build and hold schemes, fake audit confirmations, and off-the-book transactions, using these inflated figures to raise capital from investors, which in some cases was allegedly funneled into undisclosed or black corporate projects. So to summarize, the bottom line is that by mirroring the black box manufacturing and financial layering her grandfather Carl Franz V managed at the American banknote, Erica Kirk has positioned herself at the center of a highly profitable network that shields private wealth behind a public-facing charity brand. Diplomatic openings, such as a knighthood, is reserved for civilians who further international relations, just like her grandfather, Carl Kenneth Franz V. In the 1970s, Sweden was a neutral but key player in the Cold War, having high-level manufacturing executive with knighted access to Swedish-American relations provided a perfect diplomatic cover for somebody like Carl Kenneth Franz V for cross-border intelligence sharing. We also know Andrew Colvett and the media and geotagging link. He served as the primary spokesman for TPUSA and the executive producer for its media ventures, high-level surveillance capabilities following the assassination of Charlie in September of 2025. Colvett cited partners to do geotagging with devices to track 277,000 people in the vicinity of the memorial service. Intelligence networking. Colvett confirmed that one of the first calls after the assassination was from a U.S. senator, highlighting the direct line of TPUSA's inner circle has to high-level federal officials. So when Lori was an auditor, essentially in the 80s and 90s, Eastern Bloc, including Romania, was in a state of extreme instability. An auditor could hypothetically validate a local facility such as a factory or a logistics hub as meeting international standards. This validation would integrate that facility into a global corporate network like GE's, effectively laundering its reputation and making it a trusted node for moving sensitive cargo. It also could involve logic analysis exploitation. Franz V's patent methods focused on logic and analysis, automating the detection of inconsistencies in industrial systems. If someone with this expertise were to intentionally tune the logic to ignore certain patterns like missing personnel records or unlogged late-night shipments, wink, wink, the automated system would report that everything is compliant even if illicit activity was occurring in plain sight. Again, all very interesting and wanted to share.